I'd like to welcome everybody to our special webinar and advocacy update on the proposed tariffs. My name is Jim Gorey. I'm the current chairman of RVDA of Canada. And now I'd like to introduce the presenters for today. Eleanor Ham, who is the president of RVDA of Canada, joining us as well as Shane Devenish, president of CRVA, which represents manufacturers and suppliers. And finally, Charles Bernard, our Ottawa hero, who's partnered up for the last few years. He's lead economist in the Impact Public Affairs, which is our government relations firm in Ottawa. Charles is involved in day-to-day advocacy efforts and spends his time between Ottawa and Montreal. And now I'd like to turn it over to Charles, who will give us the update on what's happening with the government and the tariffs, and will provide the current information. But keep in mind, it's changing daily. Charles, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. It's good to see everybody. We'll try to be quick and leave time for the questions. I think saying that things are in flux is the main item in terms of there's a lot of changes. When we first decided to do a webinar, there was still we were during the day where we were expecting U.S. and Canadian tariffs to be imposed 25% on each side. U.S. the tariffs would have been on pretty much everything. Canada had the targeted list for an initial wave, and then the second wave of tariffs that would have come 21 days later. And through which the 21 days there would have been a consultation period. At the end of the 21 days, the anticipated, once again, when those announcements were made, RVs were part of those products that were targeted in the second wave, and that's where Eleanor, Shane, and I decided to increase some of the activity that we did with interactions and activities we did with the government, which Eleanor and Shane will talk to you about a bit more in depth. Since then, Jim, you mentioned a lot of changes. Whereas we're in we have a 30-day period. They still have not announced the exact date of where they would restart the tariffs, if even though they never really started, which gives us 30 days of preparation, engaging with the government, building a bit more of our key messaging, trying to learn more about some of the details of these tariffs, which there's still a lot of information that we're missing. Especially there was elements of let's say on the executive order from the President Trump that are still unclear, especially if there's inventory that's in transit. So we're working hard and trying to getting these information. But these 30 days are also a moment for Canadian officials to get back to the table with Americans and probably dealing or getting agreements on other items. As you may know, the main variable that allowed us to get that 30-day break and breathe a little bit, if I can say so, was regarding the border and tackling fentanyl. So both countries that were involved, or at least targeted by tariffs, the Mexicans and then the Canadians, they had an agreement that was essentially about reinforcing the border, putting troops on the border, and that allowed President Trump to have a win, right, and not lose face. While for us, as the country, it gave us more time to strategize in the future, because I think these threats will reappear often, and we'll have to have a clear Canadian strategy. But it also gives us time to find out exactly what President Trump wants, which is a big question. Eleanor and I have been in a lot of discussions about it, and there's still a major uncertainty about exactly what they're looking for. Um, as some of you may know, I work closely with the auto dealers as well, and we had representatives in Washington, and we've talked with senior officials around, or at least in the orbit of Trump and President Trump, and even then, they didn't truly understand what was the prerogative for Canada. The prerogative for Mexico kind of always has been about the border. So and there's so much relying reliant on some of the imports coming from Mexico, that it's a different kind of approach. But public officials are still kind of struggling to identify what President Trump was looking for Canada. So I think the next 30 days will be about clarifying that out. Sorry, and apparently there's a lot of not pressure, but positive words being sent from Canadian officials to the Americans, essentially to kind of create a great atmosphere where we can get in an environment where we get clarity for the next few months instead of going month by month. As I said, there's a lot of work that's being done on our side of the border because of the nature of your industry and the RV market, where it's different than some of the industries where it's almost a great balance between U.S. imports and Canadian exports. The RV industry is quite different, and we're engaged with government officials. I don't want to steal too much of Eleanor's thunder in terms of what we're doing, but that line is that line that we need to walk, which is we don't want to be seen as as an opposing player of a Canadian strong approach, because I think that will be valuable down the stretch with that administration. But at the same time, we're uniquely positioned. And it's a tough position where a majority of your products come from the States, right? So we only have essentially for the moment one layer of the tariffs that we need to really get more information and get clarity about. And I saw that some of you members have been involved in the remission process. It's still unclear with the 30 days now how it's going to work. Are they looking at some of the proposals right now? I'll let Eleanor talk a bit more about what we'll be doing on the GR side with Shane, and I can come back about the remission process. For those who are not aware, I think it's one of the tools, at least one of the only tools that we have directly from a grassroots or membership perspective, where we can send up some of your insights and you're essentially highlighting your economic impacts in your region to make it clear to Canadian government officials that we're a key industry that's reliant on these imports from the U.S. So I don't know if Leonore, it covers pretty much the basics. I don't know if you want me to add something or I can go back at the end.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, especially with the parallels. I mean, the difference is obviously with the auto industry, but some great parallels and some great key contacts. So keeping us informed on what's happening on that side has been, very important as well. So from RVDA aspect, as most of you know, we have an ongoing advocacy strategy, which we normally retool in January, and it's been a bit fluid because we've had to adapt, some of our efforts and refocus in certain areas. But one thing that's really been interesting is that, because we have a really good relationship with some government officials and members of parliament already existing from our ongoing advocacy efforts throughout the years, we've already had many meetings. Last week, had several meetings with members of parliament, continuing to push some of that. Obviously, it's been a little bit more complex because of the prorogation of government. It's been made communication a little bit more difficult. But because we have such a good foundation, elevating this concern, which is a huge concern for our members, has been easy to sort of move into that direction. Obviously, from my standpoint, when this was announced, I think it was on Saturday that RVs would be in the retaliatory tariffs, my phone started ringing probably about 5 a.m. On Sunday and Monday. I had a lot of calls, and that was part of the reason for this webinar, is just to make sure everybody's on the same page, everybody understands what we're doing, and what work we are doing behind the scenes on behalf of the dealer body. So Charles alluded to earlier a letter. We have sent a letter to, it's first of all to Minister LeBlanc, but also Minister Joly and Minister Eng, all of the ministers that are involved with LeBlanc's obviously finance, but also with international trade and tourism, small business. And so we want to ensure that they understand that in the meantime, while we're still in this 30-day window, that they understand what the economic impact of the RV industry, how many jobs we have, like over 141,000 jobs, and what we contribute, 16.2 billion to the GDP, and how important it is to keep that going. Because obviously, if the dealers are not strong, the campgrounds start to become weaker, and the tourism industry is affected. And so the one thing from our industry, as everybody on this call knows, that 95% of the product comes in from the U.S. And so The one area where it seemed that government may be willing to listen is if there's an industry that cannot source Canadian product. And that really is what we're going to be pushing, is that we do not have the Canadian infrastructure in place, the manufacturing in place to sustain the dealer network in Canada. And so as such, we need to ensure that the product is able to come in a cost-effective manner into Canada. So first of all, from our standpoint, we've had some meetings with members of Parliament. We've sent out correspondence. We're going to continue on that advocacy side with all parties, because of course we're nonpartisan. So we want to make sure that everybody's familiar with our industry. And then we're also looking at making sure that our members know about the application for remission. And I think maybe I won't go into too much detail on that, because we're going to talk about it in future steps, next directions. But there is a mechanism in place for dealers to apply for this remission, which is basically it'd be an exemption from the tariffs. And we're still investigating to see if we can do that as an industry, if we should be doing that as an association, or if dealers need to apply themselves. We do know that some dealers have already done that on their own behalf. We're going to be monitoring and following up with them to see if there are some successful remission exemptions that go through, because then that would be obviously some precedent that's set for our dealers. And then the other thing too is working with the provincial and regional RVDAs and ensuring that now that we've had our letter that's sent out to the federal government, that we're able to work with our partners very closely at the provincial level, because as you all know, while the federal government has been in flux and through the new leadership, a lot of the provinces, the provincial leaders have stepped up and have taken their own measures. And so we want to ensure that the provincial RVDAs are also speaking with their provincial elected officials, because it's very important on that side as well to keep that dialogue going. And then, of course, we'll get into grassroots involvement shortly, which is where our members come in. We also have been working with CCRVA, the Campground Association, to get them to send out letters as well as Shane at CRVA, because obviously it's a whole industry effort. This is how we collaborate and work together, and our partnership with CRVA has really helped carry on that conversation and communication down in the U.S. as well, and with our U.S. manufacturers and associations. So Shane, just maybe over to you to let us know what's been happening on that side and from a manufacturer and supplier side.
Yeah, thanks, Eleanor. And echo Eleanor's comments. It's very much hands on deck, and we all work together to whenever we have an issue like this come up. So I just want to make a comment. When tariffs were first introduced by President Trump in his first administration, RVs weren't targeted by the Canadian government, but this time around, they seem to really concentrate on Republican states when they were choosing some of the industries. For instance, Pennsylvania for Harley Davidson, Florida for the boat industry, and Indiana being the majority of our industry. So that's kind of why we're seeing the Canadian government look to include recreational vehicles in their counter tariffs. When we got wind of this, like Eleanor said, we've really had a lot of conversations with the RVIA, who completely supports us in this, and they have been engaging in some quote unquote back channel conversations with certain congressmen and senators. There is an RV caucus down there, and they have a very good relationship with them. But what they were trying to do was exempt, if President Trump was going to target certain industries as opposed to an across the board paintbrush, they were working to have RVs exempted from any tariffs coming from our manufacturers. Unfortunately, fortunately that it was completely pushed back, but it seemed if it was going to take place, it was a broad brush and not industry specific, but who knows about the future. Our guys up here in the CRVA are unique in that, they get caught both sides. They bring up their components like the refrigerators and other RV components, and they have to pay a 25% there. And then they get hit trying to, export their finished goods to the U.S. So we were in a unique situation, which would be doubly hit. So, thank goodness this has been postponed, and hopefully we can, come to a resolution, on this. We will also be sending a letter to the same representatives that Eleanor mentioned, Minister LeBlanc and others. Burlington here has a resident person, Karina Gould, who is running for the Prime Minister. So we will certainly send her a letter as well, asking for her support. So, we're fully behind, and we're all together in this. And I guess the final thing is that the U.S. manufacturers located in Indiana have been very vocal to their governor, their senators, and their House of Representative for Indiana, who they're extremely close with. Anybody who's ever gone to a breakfast or an event down there, there's always somebody from their government in Indiana, and the RV industry is extremely important to that region. So everybody's gathering on this, and let's hope that things don't come into fruition in 30 days or so. But thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So, really now it's kind of the next steps and, plan of action we've kind of alluded to from our standpoint. We would like the dealers. I mean, we can give you the information. We can share a copy of the letter that we sent. We can share a template we've developed, or in a draft template for the remission request, so that you know exactly what to be submitting. We can also help you, assist you if you don't know your member of parliament, to make those introductions if need be. But really, I think we can't just stop, because this is potentially, we don't know what's happening in 30 days or now 25 days. We do need to keep the ball rolling and need to keep our advocacy efforts up. And so we're going to rely on our membership to make a bit of noise as well. So I don't know, Charles, if you want to talk a little bit more about, grassroots advocacy and what other efforts our members should be doing.
Yeah, I think for now, I think that it's twofold. The first one is and it'll be supported by RVDA, but we'll share with you the letter that we've sent to the government, and those will be kind of the structure of the lines that we'll need to hold in terms of the importance of the industry, and that there's no availability or possibility for you to source that product elsewhere. And I think if you want to be involved, I think engaging, like Eleanor said, with your MP, can also, at every level, I think it'll be helpful. If you have contact or you're looking to make contact, we can help. But I think having those lines of we understand that there might be strategic decisions behind some of the products that have been identified for tariffs. But if you're looking at a long term, I wouldn't say decoupling, because it'll never happen, but strengthening of Canadian industry, whatever it is. If you want to strengthen Canadian tourism, for the moment, the only way you can source those products is in the U.S. And I think that's something that will need to be reaffirmed with every member of national assemblies, provincial governments, federal governments, especially federally, considering we're in the midst of, like Eleanor said as well, prorogation and upcoming elections. If these discussions with the Americans, they tend to last, and we go over the summer. It's not about making it a partisan issue. That's the last thing we need to do. It's a Canada issue, but I think the landscape of power will change in Canada eventually, and we need to make sure that the new people in, whoever they are aware of that dynamic. And so I think that's important in terms of just engaging and knowing the lines. And when I say lines, is necessarily just the argument and the narrative that it's a legitimate narrative that we're putting forward. And the other thing is, and that's maybe something on my end, you have information in terms of whether it's your suppliers, everybody involved, like there's a lot of information that's going on, like everything that you think can be useful to the advocacy efforts, like please share it with us. There's already a few members that have contacted Eleanor for questions, and these questions, even though we might not have the answer at the moment, they give us tracks or at least trajectories where we can inquire with the government and get more clarity. And I think at the end of the day, with this world of uncertainty, at least for you and your daily operations, having clarifications on many aspects will be necessary. So once again, collaborative effort within the RVDA as a way of gathering information and insights, and on the other hand, be involved with your politicians and please make it try to have an argument that's about the industry, not necessarily a party or why did we end up in this situation. I think at the moment it's a moot point. I think right now it's just about you have an industry that's unique. There's very few industry that's fully or almost fully dependent on U.S. Supplies. So that'll be the challenge. And then yeah, so that's it for this. And I don't know, did you want me to talk about the remission process as well, or a bit of more what it was, or?
Yeah, sure. If you have any insights on that and any timelines, obviously, I don't know if we know exactly the timelines on how it's happening, but
Yes, I can give a few words. So for people who are not aware, is that when I think the day before the supposed start of the tariffs, Finance Canada dropped it was not overly public, but they dropped a document where essentially they're giving you instructions as a business to make an argument of why you would need a remission on the tariffs. Usually remissions, if you read up on it, they're I don't know how to say it in English, but they're one shot only, right? If you get a tariff for a product and so that process has existed before, and then you ask, and then they kind of refund you. I don't know the minutia of it, but that's how it worked. In this process, they said it wouldn't be for a one time. It'd be for I don't know once again how they would structure it, but I think if you get remission as a business, you'd be free from every time a product would come in from getting hit by tariffs. So that process, I'll go over it quickly, but it was structured around two arguments. So the first one is, can you prove that you're doing products, you're building manufacturing products in Canada with inputs that you can only get in the US? So that would be less of the argument. The other argument would be the other option, which is proving that sourcing of the final product can only be obtained in the US, which would be the case for the RV industry. The difficulty, I'll be honest, with that part of the equation is that they mentioned that not only do you need to prove that the supply is only American, which I think is easier to do for many of your businesses, but that it's essential for Canadians. So that's why the economic aspect, yes, it is essential for tourism activities, but generally speaking, I think if you can underline the number of employees that you have, your impact in the community, and general employment that the industry generate, which RVDA has those numbers as well. I think we're building a scenario where it might make more sense. Essentially, we're putting the government officials in a position where, okay, are we keeping it to be strategic about Indiana, or I think personally that in the long run, those arguments about being strategic, they kind of lose their weight. Because if they don't make any traction, and I think eventually in the long run they might say, okay, well, it's an industry that's struggling because of these tariffs, we can readjust. So the templates that we've built, to be fair, if you go on the website now, I don't think you can find that form at the moment, just because I think they didn't want to, because the 30 days break, they don't want everybody to apply in a way. I think some of the members have done it. What we've did is it was almost exactly the same form that for the Chinese tariffs. So on the website you can find these. So we did a template, and it's a template that every business will have to fill, every dealership. I think it can be done under the banner of a group. I think it would be doable. That I need to verify, because there's still two things that we need clarity is, can a group do it? Because I know some of you represent many dealerships. And the other one is, can an association on behalf of its member do it? We might even do it, and they might just realize at the moment that so we might even do it for due diligence. But I've contacted government officials to know and do we need a business by business application? If that's the case, that's where the grassroots efforts will come in, and we would need pretty much every member to send a document, and it's essentially just giving data and a bit of story. It's a few lines of what's your business, if you can add the date of when it was created, the role of your community, the number of employees, there's amounts of overhead, a lot of information. So that will take time, and I understand you all extremely busy, especially in these times. But that's something we'll need you to do. But for the moment, I think that's on ice. So I just we'll still share the template so you can at least look at the question and start gathering some of that data. But in terms of submitting it, we'll keep you in the loop when that window reopens.
Yeah, it was interesting because it was very front and center at the beginning, and then the other day I was like, "Oh, this page is gone; it's no longer available." So I wasn't sure if they were still taking submissions, but we do have the email address, and we'll definitely get more information to our members. I did have a question here from one of the group that says, is the hold for 30 days and then another 21-day phase for phase two, so 51 days for RV tariff, or would after the 30 days, do we know? And so the 30 days are the US, the 21 days were phase two from the Canadian government. Do we know if that would be then reinstated, the phase one and two in Canada? You're on mute.
The way I read it, and once again, it depends. There might be something might be said until then, and then the decision changes, or somebody's frustrated on the American side, and that their whole approach changed. But the way I read it is that once we'll get the final date for the 30 days, which I think with February, I think would bring us to the 6th of March. The way I read it once again is that at that moment that would be the first wave, and then we would add the 21 days for the second wave, which would bring us in the end of March. But that might change once we get closer. It might just be a direct, and it also depends. To be fair, it also depends on we're not part of the conversation, so maybe the second wave is truly what had a lot of effects on the business community in the U.S. and on obviously you saw the stock market effects. So maybe the Canadian government sees some of that window. They might see it as non-necessary because they know that those products in the second wave have the most weight in terms of pressuring the government. So that I wouldn't want to express myself saying that's what it's going to be. But for me, the way I understood it and the way I've talked to a few officials, it's like exactly what we got for the 4th of February to just be repositioned in March, and then we'd start over there. So hopefully that's the case, because that would still give us the 21-day consultation period. I have a hard time seeing full-on tariffs on all those products, wave one and two, coming in early March without giving the consultation period. I think they'd go back on the word that I would be surprised to do so, that they do so.
We had another comment. Have we encouraged our government to withdraw all retaliatory tariffs until some later date, like 6 months? That would be less knee-jerk reactions, so we can adjust to export tariffs first prior to imposing import tariffs. So we haven't specifically done that, haven't specifically worded our approach that way. Right now, our approach was, specifically to our industry. I don't know if there are other groups that have just focused on a longer term. That would be probably more of a question for Charles.
I think, and I understand I would agree that like having a bit more bigger periods, but I think it's also like it needs to be, doesn't need to be, but it will be aligned with what the American president is doing. So if he's giving, I think they'll want to answer and show strength right away. I don't think they'll want to, because I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking right here, but like for me, there's also a risk if they do say, okay, we'll wait for the retaliation because we need to be a bit more aligned with our industry, and then those tariffs have a direct effect on Canadian industry, and then they show up again to the table of negotiation in a lessened position of power, or with a bit less leverage because their economy has been hit. Yeah, the Americans will economy will be it as well, but I think they'll be able in at least in the short term to absorb it very well. So I think that argument will be done and has been done, but I think it'll be by general industry voices as Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Business Council about the need to consult and and make sure that the retaliation doesn't necessarily just simply I wouldn't say kill, but really hurt specific industries. I think for now the approach for the RV industry is about underlining a reality that I'm sure many politicians are not aware that you can't get RVs outside of essentially you can't get RV outside of country. So I think that's our approach, and I think we'll uh, on your behalf and with Illinois' agreement, I think we'll hitchhike ourselves to some of the more national movements about being prudent with those measures. Because if it's, let's say, a 3 month period of where they stop retaliation, it's good directly for industry, right? And because the fight is mostly regarding the Canadian retaliation measures, we can be a bit more targeted in our efforts. But that for sure is in the back of my mind. But I think in the short term, let's just give the information about our industry first. And by doing so, by saying so, you can read it that every week where there's no retaliation, it's good for the RV industry. So I think your argument is part of the messaging, but in a much more nuanced way. But it's a good point.
I had one more question. Phase one included appliances. Would appliances completed RVs be tariffed individually? Can government brokers, manufacturers do this with regards to values?
I think from what I've read that they were saying that it's like in the classification of the retaliation measures, it was underlined that they were part of RV. So I think they would be targeted. Now the question is how they do it and how the brokers and for me that's a whole different ball game because I think it would add a lot of complexity and so I'm not fully sure of how those tariffs would be articulated and then let's say the second wave, which would be the RVs and these products. I don't know if would it be tariffed as like twice or would be only tariff as the full vehicle. I think there's from my reading of it in the second wave there'd be a tariff on the full vehicle, then a tariff on the fridge or the appliances and part of the RV. But I think those are the minutiae that needs to be clarified for you and your operations, but also for brokers, importers, and people at the border because I think there's a lot of moving pieces. The trend, like I said at the beginning, the transit one is also a big one where it'll be unclear exactly because I know some of you the RV would have been bought, the floor plan already agreed upon, and then you're essentially waiting for the unit. But at the same time, if that transit happens before so if the unit is from Indiana, it's coming, and then the date comes in. Apparently, the unit would be safe, but does it really materialize at the border? That's once again like I don't want to throw uncertainty, but those are and sadly and frustratingly sometimes the only way we can know is when they actually occur, and then we learn a bit more. But we'll do our best. And to be fair, once again, will you engage with public officials? They don't even know. So that was done very quickly, as you might expect, and everybody that's maybe under the political, like not in the political tent, and people that actually organize and apply, execute those tariffs, like they have really no or little information on how they will actually materialize, maybe because they thought they'd find a way to avoid them. So that's a long-winded answer, but we'll be keeping information and we'll communicate with you maybe more than we've done, maybe at a more rapid rate, so we can give you a bit of insights of what's going on with these public officials. And on the other hand comes like what I was saying, if by experience of what you're knowing from your brokers and all of that, if you get information, please share it with us so we can share it with the rest of your colleagues.
Yeah, thank you. And I know both Shane has been talking to one brokerage. We've been speaking with another member brokerage, and yeah, exactly. I mean, at the beginning they were saying, well, nobody at the border itself wasn't going to know how to process this in 2 days. So there's that side of it, and just trying to understand how it is. I mean, it's from our understanding, it would be that when it crosses the border, product would be at that point charged the 25%. It would come through the CARM portal. So similar to the way dealers are charged GST, they would pay that at the time, although it's a little bit different with GST or HST because you can claim your input tax credit. So obviously if that does become the case, that would affect cash flow incredibly with our dealer body. We've reached out to some of the finance companies as well, just to address our concerns. So, really everybody in the industry is looking at this and trying to ensure that if the tariffs do end up going through, that we can mitigate, any business risk.
And also there's the delay that they may have an allowance of up to 3 days after whatever deadline is imposed, as long as the Canadian dealer can prove that it's in transit, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so maybe talk about that, Eleanor.
Yeah, there was I mean, I know we had some information on this, was more focused on the tariffs and stuff that was coming from China on containers, but also there is a rule that says somewhere that if it's in transit, if it's been sold by the factory and it's in transit, and that's actually one of our next questions, that are would it come into effect? And it's from our understanding that if you have a bill of lading and it's left the factory, that you may have a limited time, and we don't, it might be a few days, but to get that product, we're hoping that it's, as long as you have the bill of lading, that time can be a little bit longer, because we know sometimes there's issues with drivers and getting product into Canada, but hopefully that those would not be affected. But that remains still be seen. So, are there any other questions? Anything else you want to add, Shane, Jim, Charles?
No, I'm good on my end. Once again, thanks for
Yeah.
No, go ahead,
Yeah.
Shane.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it's really important that when you get the letter from Eleanor to pass it on to all your MPs and talk about your business and how this will affect it. I think the more pressure on that we can get out there, the better.
Someone asked, does in transit include units already financed or physically in transit?
That's one of the clarity, because that's a huge on the auto side, it's a huge question too, because inventory volumes are big, and yeah, so sometimes it's financed, the money's already transferred from the bank, the floor plan's ready. Essentially, the car, the only thing is not there is the car in the lot, right? But technically, it's already owned by the dealership. So that's a huge question, and with those tariffs and the uncertainty on supply chains, it'll add some delays. I'm sure, at least in the short term, that will have to be kind of absorbed. So once again, sorry we don't have an answer for this, but I think it's all of those items that we're keeping close to us, and that we'll share with the public officials when they have a bit more clarity than first and foremost the tariffs are going to happen, because we got to let them understand that if the car is financed, essentially the car is owned by the so. But they'll have to answer some of these questions for every industries, and there's like every industry will have some minutia that's complicated in a way, depending on what the. So it'll take a lot of time, and we just got to be patient, and once again, if on the other end tariffs come in and we don't get all those answers, but you have an experience, good or bad, with the tariffs, that information will be key at just building our understanding of what exactly is going on, because everything's going to go very quickly. But once again, we might meet in 30 days, and we'll have a year break, and it'll lead up to the CUSMA negotiation, and all of that will be moot. But yeah, I think it's just about sharing information is key, and stay in the loop, and we'll do our best to keep you informed on the Ottawa side of the equation.
Yeah, and a couple people have asked about the template letter. Yes, we do have a template letter. We just finalized it yesterday, so it's going to go out to our members. I think another version is going to go out to the members of CRVA. We've asked CCRVA, which is the National Campground Association, to get a template out to their campground operators, so that everybody has. Feel free to. I'm going to say tweak it a little bit, but to put some personal information in there as well. But it's a 2-page letter that we are going to send a copy to everybody, so that you can forward it on to the corresponding members of Parliament and MLAs, or as well in your provincial government, your provincial government. We are gathering as much information from our members as well. We appreciate everybody taking the time to attend today. Hopefully some of the information was helpful. Again, it may change, but we'll try to have a few more of these as we get closer, at least one more webinar as we get closer to that 30-day timeline, if things look like they're going to proceed with tariffs, so we can get some more information out to you. I want to thank Shane from CRVA for the support, and the partnership's always great. Thank you to Jim, our chair, who his camera's not working, but for his tireless efforts. And thank you to Charles, who's our feet on the ground and keeps us informed with everything that's happening on the government front. So it's really a great partnership, and thanks to our members for their continued support.